Konnichiwa, hello, good morning and welcome to Fuji Speedway in Japan. We're about 2 hours drive to the west of Tokyo and in the shadow of the holy mountain, Mount Fuji. Ready for the third and final practice before the 6 hours of Fuji, round 5 of the FIA World Endurance Championship Season 10. Hello everybody, I'm Martin Haven. With me in the commentary box, Graham Goodwin, and I'm delighted to welcome for his first time here as a pedestrian, if that's the right word, and Davidson. And the last time we were here was actually not long before COVID. It was October 2019, and we have not been back since. But this is a fantastic place to come racing for the drivers, because A, the circuit is challenging, but B, the fans are heroic in their loyalty and their determination, aren't they?
Fantastic to be back here at Fuji Speedway. 2019, as you said, Martin, the last time we were here, and yeah, I was driving back then. It's such a great challenge for all the drivers. You can see the circuit map there in front of you. Sector 1 takes you down the main straight, which is 1.5 kilometers long, the longest that we have on the standard circuit that we go to, bar Le Mans, of course. And Sector 2, I would really say that's the kind of medium speed section where you need good aerodynamic performance from your car. And into Sector 3, starting at turn 11, Dunlop corner, through turn 14 and 15, the final corner. Very tight and twisty, technical. You need a good mechanical stability from the car in that part. So it really throws a good mix of all different areas, and it's a proper compromise around this track for setup. You can either go low downforce and get the straight line speed, maximize that 1.5 kilometers straight, or focus on the higher downforce to give you good speed around that final sector. So it's a good challenge for all drivers and team personnel.
Well, we're not quite into free practice 3 yet. You'll see on here, cars on track, and there is something you'll see nowhere else in the FIA World Endurance Championship, because we've got buses on track as well. This is Circuit Safari, and something like 200 lucky fans came through the lottery for Circuit Safari, going around on a tour bus. As you can see, there's one media bus for the fans here, and the opportunity with cars at near racing speed on track with them. We did those a couple of times before COVID intervened. It's hugely popular, massively oversubscribed. It's a regular part of Super GT races and adopted by the FIA WEC a few years before the COVID pause, Martin.
And I think it's the sort of thing that should be at every track. Why would you not, as a corporate sponsor, want to be able to get your guests out on track? You know, there's not too many places where a fairly average corporate guest can get onto the grid before the race. You can do that in the WEC. You get much more chance to mingle with the drivers. Oh dear, a puncture for the Dempsey Proton car. Christian Reed, Seb Priaulx and Harry Tinknell. Yeah.
It's a good job that didn't happen while flying past one of those buses.
Yes. The real worry is, why has that happened?
Yeah, I'm hearing the driver of bus number 5 to race control.
Yeah. Is that Giancarlo Fisichella already? Well, now,
contact in turn 12.
So the one thing we can say, it wasn't Fisichella. Yeah. There he goes now.
Hopefully no contact.
You wait for 3 years for a Circuit Safari.
3 come along at once. We did actually say that for pure comedy value, we need to get Ant Davidson in the white gloves that all the chauffeurs and drivers here have, taxi drivers and everything, driving a bus, and Antonio Felix da Costa, his teammate in the same car last year, coming alongside, giving a little wave, and then
bit of throttle blip.
Yeah.
I don't think that would end very well.
That's not a puncture.
That's
suspension.
That's a collapse. That is collapsed left rear suspension.
Oh dear.
That is. Well, now the cars will have been worked on overnight, and that's a little bit of a worry. We look here at the Iron Dames, back in action. Rahel Frey, Michelle Gatting and Sarah Bovey. And Graham, interesting that now one of their teammates, Giancarlo Fisichella, the above mentioned, at Iron Links, regaling the ladies with tales of when he first came here back in the late 1900s.
Where did that go? Went early in the lap, didn't it, by the look of things?
Well, that might actually have gone earlier than the cameras picked it up, but by that stage, huge tyre rub, lots of tyre smoke. Who was in the 7
That
car.
was Harry Tinknell.
That was
Tinknell,
Tinker's,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh dear.
He's put on a bit too much weight over the break, hasn't he, obviously?
Shouldn't have had that second pudding last night, Harry.
Harry's looking at it going,
What?
I didn't do anything.
What did someone else do to that car? Yeah, that's not optimal operating height, is it? No.
That damper isn't damping.
Gone for the extreme soft setup.
That's what you get, Anne Davidson, when they have drivers in those cars that are just too tall. I find that.
It's just selfishly tall,
I
I
mean,
say.
a
There we
sensible
go.
height.
Circuit Safari is done for this year, and as I say, hugely popular with the fans here. We've got fans in the house for free practice 3 and for qualifying today.
Yeah.
Am I right in thinking, Graham, that you've been on one of those buses before?
Twice. It's
twice
great.
before.
Oh, it's great. I mean, here's the thing. I've known about it because obviously I cover Super GT with my good friend RJ O'Connell in the States. But it is so much better than you think it's going to be. It's amazing.
Yeah. It must just be such great fun. And almost as much fun as a blimp. Let's get down with Louise Beckett and hear from Harry Tinknell.
Well, Harry, that's early on, isn't it? How did it feel in the car? What do you think happened?
Yeah, obviously just like the safari session, so we're just, driving around. And into turn 1 on the last lap, it felt a little bit strange on the braking. Like I had a slide that was sort of felt unusual, but not like a failure, but just unusual. And then going through 5, I nearly spun the car, like had a huge moment. So I thought something was up, and then after that, it started sitting down on the rear left. So some sort of either like suspension or wheel failure, or wheel bearing, the diff potentially. But it was going to happen. Probably the best session for it to happen.
Definitely is, but obviously it's free practice 3 now. How long do you think this will take?
I think they're still working out exactly what it is, but hopefully it shouldn't be too long. Especially if it's just like a wishbone failure or something like that, you can swap the parts out fairly quickly. But if it's a diff, then obviously that takes a lot longer. So we'll have to see. But it's annoying because the car actually felt quite good. I know, again, only the safari session, but you can still get a little feel for it. So we've been a little bit off so far. Like our position's not been great, but our times are actually only 2 or 3 tenths off the front. So we only need to find a little bit more. We've got a lot of success ballast in the car, which we're fighting against as well. But I think we're in the mix. We just need to get this thing sorted now.
Good. Now let's just talk about the safari. How was that for you? Did you find it a bit bizarre that there's a bus on track? Have you taken part in a safari before here?
Yeah, I've done it a couple of times. I think back in 2018 was maybe the last time, and then it was raining like crazy and huge spray. So when you see the buses stopped on the side of the track, it's a little bit more scary. But in the dry, it's okay. But yeah, it's great. I mean, you try and get as close as you can without, still being safe. But I'd imagine I'd actually quite like to do it in the bus if you're quite interested to see that. But yeah, of course, the first time you ever do it, it's a little bit weird. Obviously you're so low to the ground and you're looking up at these like giant double-decker buses or whatever. But yeah, it's good fun. And it's, something that we should look at in Europe, I think.
All right, thank you. Hopefully we'll see you out in this session at the end of it. Thanks.
We'll do our best. Cheers.
Well, Harry has had that experience of being on track. I've been on the bus, and it is extraordinary. He's talking about staring up at these massive vehicles. He did, of course, race against BMW back in the day. So
very good.
And
below the belt, I feel.
Of course, he drove the front-wheel drive Nissan as well briefly, so he knows what a bus feels like. No disrespect. Yeah, fans here, and that's. Japan has only just started to come out of another sort of big close down for COVID. So, by only just, I mean on Monday.
I thought we were going to hear from Eduardo.
I think we are.
I'm going to start talking, and as soon as I start talking, he'll start talking, won't he?
1 minute. 1 minute to start FP3.
Is our
1
assistant
minute
race
to
director.
start free practice 3.
It's worth saying, by the way, this is, since the COVID pause, the very first FIA World Championship to visit Japan, and it is so delightful to be back. People have been, it's always an awesome place to visit.
Yeah, I was speaking to one of the circuit managers here at the Fuji International Speedway, and he was saying that if it wasn't for the Olympics, the Olympics that took place here, it would have been very tight financially.
Yeah.
Without any action at all.
Well, cycling for the delayed Olympics took place here, and there's been pretty large-scale developments here to accommodate that. New roads around the circuit.
15 seconds to start free practice 3.
Also,
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pit exit is green. Pit exit is green. This is the start of free practice 3. This is the start of the free practice 3 session.
Free practice 3 getting underway at Fuji. 60 minutes after 2 90-minute sessions yesterday for the cars and drivers to get themselves fully bedded in as international endurance racing returns to this track. Opened in 1965, of course, one of its most famous days that really put it on the map, the showdown in the Formula One World Championship in 1976 when James Hunt grabbed the title from Niki Lauda in driving rain, the first ever globally televised Formula One Grand Prix. We are here as we return to action, round 5 of the FIA World Endurance Championship. Martin Haven, Anthony Davidson and Graham Goodwin. And Graham, last international racing on here was the road racing in the Olympic Games. There's a lot of development going on here as well. Brand new hotel's been built since we were here in October 2019, and there's a big industrial park as well. This place is owned by Toyota in the way that Suzuka is owned by Honda, and they're looking at turning this into a massive Japanese motoring and motorsport industry hub.
And it's coming. I mean, we have already had, it's always been a bit of a hub for the domestic motorsports industry. Plenty of the Super GT teams based locally here. Good to see, by the way, our first opportunity to see D-Station's new operating centre opposite the operating centre for Car Guy. Ex-Asia Le Mans Series champions, and we've actually got Takeshi Kimura involved there. Trouble for the 28 hands.
Yeah, that was lined up with the rest of them on the way out when we saw the green light, but Zach Rasmussen behind the wheel of that one.
Yeah, obviously
Rasmussen
didn't start.
Getting wheeled back. So, yeah, they were quick yesterday. That car 28 was second in FP2 to the sister car 38, which was fastest. So a good day for Jota, but it's not an ideal start for FP3 for them.
They were second in free practice 2 yesterday. Jota bossing out the top 2 positions in free practice 2. By the way, 2 free practice sessions to set a tiny little bit of WC history yesterday.
Which was?
Free practice 1 saw for the second and third then LMP2 identical times for 2 of the LMP2 cars. It was both of the United Autosports cars with an identical time. That was the first time that has ever happened at the end of a session in WC history.
3 decimal points.
Yes.
Yeah.
To the thousandth of a second.
No, it's never happened before. And then guess what? It happened again in free practice 2 in GTE AM, and again it was the cars in second and third.
Wow.
It was a 1-2 for the Iron Lynx cars in GTM and free practice 2, with the Iron Dames fastest, with the 60 car in the hands of Giancarlo Fisichella second quickest, and that mark was matched to the thousandth by the number 33 TF Sport car. That car, by the way, rebuilt around one of the team's ELMS chassis that was dispatched from Monza after the terrifying shunt for Enrique Chavez in Italy, and of course the cars then had to be contained here immediately afterwards. Happily, TF Sport had 4 Aston Martins available, with the 2 cars for ELMS and the 2 for WEC. So a bit of a reshuffling of resources. On board now, though, gentlemen, with the number 64 Corvette, come here as winners from Monza.
And a car and a team that have never been here. Only Nick Tandy in the entire Corvette racing lineup has ever been to Fuji. He's raced here twice before in World Endurance, but for the rest of them, it is a voyage into the unknown. I was doing a track walk on Thursday and walking along with Tommy Milner, and he was talking to the team and going, okay, yeah, this drops away a little bit like it does on the sim. Oh, that's quite different. That's very different from the sim. Okay, no, that feels quite similar. So obviously, to learn the track, sims and Davidson are a really, really useful tool for the driver and for the engineers, but not always maybe quite exactly as accurate as you would like.
I was going to say, that doesn't sound like a particularly brilliant simulator if they're walking around the circuit. Oh, that looks a bit different, is it? Because from the sim work that I do, whenever I go to a track, I think that is exactly as it looked and felt in the simulator. So
maybe the engine Mercedes F1 sim is slightly different. I
think that's
always room for improvement.
That's going to be the difference, though, isn't it? And for a team getting data from an external supplier to their own data, with yourself, with your role with Mercedes, and then obviously with Toyota, lots of experience at these tracks, and bringing almost as many engineers to the circuit to program the sim as they do to work on the car.
Well, with track time being so limited these days in every category around the world, it makes sense to do it mostly on the simulator. You know, just not for training drivers. That's one very small aspect of the sims. It's trying updates to the cars
Setup,
that only really the manufacturers can afford to bring, and therefore they can afford to develop their simulators to a higher level. As we see a spin for the Inter-Europol in the final corner. Who was at the wheel there?
Alex Brundle.
Alex Brundle. So, yeah, he was talking to me yesterday about how good the car felt and how you can push every single lap now on these Goodyear tyres. So it's very different from the past where they were having to tyre conserve, and that's one of the it kind of went against you around this track. The tyre degradation was massive in the past, and so it's good to know that they're putting it around here.
Wow.
Very, very high tyre deg because of the final sector that they're coming into now at turn 10, all the way through. All of this is very traction limited. See the rubber marks on the circuit as well? That's all, it's coming from somewhere. So your tyres are degrading the whole way through. But he's saying now you can push the whole way, and it's good. You feel like you're on a qualifying lap.
But isn't this the lowest tyre energy circuit of the entire season? So is it that
they overheat
with more power that they used to have? The LMP2s are just too powerful for the tyre.
I think before the compounds were softer. They were in a kind of mini tyre war, obviously with Michelin. Now now it's a monopoly. Goodyear have the sole tyre for LMP2. You can afford to just not throttle back, but just make the tyre a bit more robust and not quite so close to the edge in terms of its degradation.
I seem to recall not long before the COVID pause there was a pretty substantial resurfacing of this place as well. So it has evolved in the time that we've been coming here with the FIA World Endurance Championship. Bit of a lock-up there for the 22 car at the moment in the hands of Felipe Albuquerque.
Now the other feature perhaps this weekend, and this is really testing out the curse of the commentator, is that the weather forecast is that there should be no rain.
You've done it now.
Which would be a rarity. Just looking back at the last time we came here, how long ago was it? Well, Toyota 8 ahead of Toyota number 7, so much the same. Rebellion was third in what was then LMP1, which no longer exists. Rebellion are no longer racing. Fourth,
LMP1.
Fourth, Team LNT, a Ginetta. That's how long ago that was. That seems like quite a long time ago, doesn't it? And it was, 3 years and a whole rule change in the top class later, about which much more, I think, over the next
3 years, but it's actually only 2 events worth that we've missed. So we missed 2020 and 2021.
Yep,
correct. So we've missed 2, and we're back here for 2022. But yeah, technically 3 years, but
it feels a long time. And in part, that's because
technically 3 years. Well, it is 3 years, and we would only have been here twice in the previous time because this is the 3rd year. So technically, yes.
I just like to confuse the situation.
It's a long weekend to go, gentlemen.
It feels like
technically
like 2 years because we're here in 2022.
We are indeed.
Yeah, but the last time was 2019, not 2020. No, you're right. You're right.
We haven't missed 3 races here. We've missed 2.
No, but when I looked at that and there was Ginetta, I thought, blimey, that's like ancient history. I mean, no disrespect, but it does feel like a very long time ago that Ginetta were part of LMP1. I mean, we kissed goodbye to LMP1 at the end of that year, didn't we?
But we've got now Hypercar. We're on board with the number 8 in the hands of Brendan Hartley. He tops the times at the moment in Free Practice 3, the only car under 130, a 129.855.
As they were yesterday as well.
They were.
In FP2, they dipped into the 29s, and it's almost like a carbon copy. It's like the screens haven't updated since yesterday's FP2. I think they have. A 31.2 now for Loic Duval in the car 94 Peugeot.
And when was the last time that a Peugeot raced here?
They've never raced.
No, they wouldn't have raced here.
Never raced here?
No, the last time Peugeot raced as a factory sports car squad in Japan was 1992. It was Suzuka, and that was Derek Warwick, and guess who? Yannick Dalmas.
Did they win?
They did. Here is, though.
So that was the 905B.
So they're looking for a much better weekend than they had in Monza. We didn't have great expectations. This is their first season back since 2011, and brand new car, obviously, in the hypercar category, hybrid. It's all a new learning curve for Peugeot, but I think they had higher expectations than we had.
I sort of felt that in the pre-event press conference, they were basically saying, it's not a race car, it's a test bed. We're not a race team, we're a test team. And this weekend in Monza, that's where that's all got to start changing, because next year we can't say, oh, we've only done 10. We have to be a race team. And they were saying, you know, I sort of got the impression actually that if they got both cars through to the end of the race with minimum problems, that they would go, okay, right, it works.
Yeah.
Now we've got to go away and make it reliable and fast.
They didn't like what happened in Monza, you know, to have two cars, not just one, but two cars suffering multiple technical failures throughout the race, throughout all of the test sessions. They want to not just score a podium this weekend because Glickenhaus aren't here. They want at least one car to start the race through to the end without any technical issues.
Let's just take a look here. Toyota versus Peugeot on the main straight. 1.5 kilometres down this main straight.
So just under 1 mile for all of you imperialists out there. So yeah, it goes on, even in a racing car, it feels like it goes on forever. And then you've got to pick your braking point into turn 1. Try not to lock up. It's a bit of a strange corner, turn 1. You can see the two very different lines there taken by Brendan Hartley and Loic Duval. Loic Duval obviously spent a lot of time around this track in his Super Formula days and Super GT as well, as James Rossiter knows this track incredibly well as well because of that. I don't know if they were teammates over here, but they've certainly raced each other a lot around this track.
Yeah, James fastest in the Peugeot crew in free practice 1 yesterday. That switched to Loic Duval for free practice 2 to head the Peugeot runners behind the two Toyotas.
So this is great to see them,
isn't it?
nose to down, because Toyota definitely had the advantage in Monza. The Toyota, I think, like Le Mans, is more in its comfort zone on longer circuits with those huge straights like in Monza and Le Mans. But here, although you have one long straight that I mentioned before, you do have this very tight, technical, twisty section in the third sector. And if I'm looking at it here, just from the rear shot of from the Toyota, it looks like the Peugeot is just that little bit more agile. It looks to me like the smaller car with a lower weight distribution.
Yeah. Watching yesterday, it really looked like in the tighter stuff, the Toyota was understeering a lot more than the Peugeot. But on the straight is the real problem, because the Toyota just goes away and the Peugeot only closes up right at the very end of the straight.
I hope you stick with this again, because it did look to me as if the Peugeot was better under braking.
Yeah.
First time around, of course it compresses, but
I don't think you've seen there.
It got through and out of the corner better than the Toyota. But you're right, in straight line speed, the Toyota does seem to have an edge.
And so unless you get ahead of the Toyota, you're really going to struggle to pass it. I don't see, on the lap and a bit we've seen, I don't see where the Peugeot is going to make the move. It's going to have to happen in traffic. But by that stage, you worry that the Toyota is going to start creeping away from the Peugeot. 28 in the garage.
No, that's the car that remember was being pushed back earlier in the session. Just to add, while we just look at the Jota team going to work here, you said about Peugeot will want to improve and show what they've got. There's a good reason for that, because the cavalry's coming, and it's coming very quickly.
Yes.
We've got a 5-car hypercar grid here. We lose one at the end of this season. The Alpine will go away, but boy, do we gain some punch after that. And I will say this much and no more: there's more good news to come, and it's coming in days and not weeks. So we are going to have a double figures grid of hypercars for the full season. But there is more hypercar news for the FIA World Endurance Championship to come, and it's coming very soon indeed.
Now, you say the Alpine goes away. The Alpine goes away,
For
but
what
they
year?
are already in the process of developing a hypercar to come back in. So next year, 2023, leading into the centenary of Le Mans, we have
At least 11 cars on the full season grid.
Porsche arriving.
2 factory cars and customer cars to come.
And a team that hasn't won at Le Mans overall since 1965. Ferrari. Correctamundo. And if Porsche versus Ferrari versus anybody else at Le Mans doesn't get the juices going, then you need to get to the doctor in a hurry, because that's going to be epic.
And then add in Cadillac with a single car for the season, and we're expecting extra cars for Le Mans. That's 23. That's the top class there. 24. Then we now know the news since we were at Monza is confirmed that BMW are coming with WRT.
Yep.
We know that Alpine will be back with their hypercar to the LMDH rules, and we know too that Lamborghini are coming. And there's a solid rumour that one of our teams in the WEC this year, that would be Premier Iron Lynx, may very well be the team of choice for Lamborghini on both sides of the Atlantic, because in parallel, of course, with what's going on here with the WEC, you've then additionally got what's going on with the GTP class in IMSA.
And then talking at the top of the show about saying goodbye to LMP1, we are also saying goodbye to GTE. There will be no more GTE cars.
No more GTE cars after next year. After this year, this is the final season. This is the penultimate race ever for GTE Pro. What a magnificent thing that's been. There's Jimmy Bruni. He's been what a big part of the GTE Pro history. Multiple title winner with Ferrari, now a Le Mans winner with Porsche in this 911 RSR, an astonishing car. And a long conversation with a couple of the guys behind this programme yesterday, and boy, they are going to miss this mid-engined Porsche 911 RSR. GTE stays with us for one more year in what is predicted to be a record-breaking size of GTE AM grid for next season. And hearing some exciting things happening there before we then shift in 2024 to a GT3 base formula in ACO Rules Racing.
I see our GTE Pro teams, all you've got to do is put a bronze in and suddenly it's a GTE AM team.
Well, you know, I mean,
you keep your factory drivers fit and healthy, the ones that aren't driving LMDH Porsches, and suddenly, you know, you've got a super competitive GT3 car, right? Because there's nothing wrong with Porsche's GT3 car either.
Yeah.
Really goes to show the strength of the GTE car as well through this section here. The Toyota overtook them on the straight in the braking zone into turn 10. And it's exactly what Nick Tandy was saying to me the other day. Said, look, I almost feel sorry for the hypercar drivers when they overtake us, because you can see how much they're struggling, even compared to us, in the cornering speeds. And that was a great example there, as the Porsche was all over the back of the Toyota in the change of direction from 10 to 11, and then gained actually through turn 12, this corner we're looking at on the screen now.
It rather speaks to a conversation I was having, an online conversation yesterday with a fan, asking for a little bit of insight into a couple of aspects here, and I think was challenged fairly electronically, vocally, on something I said, which is this will be the first time in the WEC era that Toyota bring a car here that is not hybrid boosted down that straight, because whilst it's got hybrid power, it's not a power boost, is it, Ant? It's a cumulative total.
It's a power unit that has battery power as well, just fully integrated. It's not an additional boost on top of the ICE, the internal combustion engine. When the boost happens, when the hybrid kicks in, the internal combustion engine decreases in power.
So it's capped, it's a power cap effectively, isn't it? And this is
exactly
part of the way in which the performance is being managed for Hypercar. It's one of the reasons why this is proving to be so successful. It is part of what is looking set to be an astounding new era in top class of international sports car racing. And
you do have to say with that hybrid, with that ruling, it's purely there for marketing reasons. The fact that the car has hybrid, because it doesn't even gain you fuel usage as well, which I first thought this season coming into this new hypercar category, this new regulation. I just assumed that a hybrid car would use less fuel. It doesn't. That's all calculated by the BOP.
Yep.
All of the cars use the same. So the only reason you would have it on your car now is purely for marketing reasons.
It's to make it sexy.
It does give you four-wheel drive,
of
course, because it drives through the front wheels, the hybrid, when the battery's kicking in, but it can only activate above 190 kilometers an hour, which is very high speed.
Yep.
It's a corner like we're looking at now, turn 5. That's around 190 kilometers an hour on the exit. So you're not really traction limited at that point, and that's where you really need the benefit of four-wheel drive. So that again has gone. So I can't see any technical advantage for having a hybrid car versus the likes of the Alpine, which is just a standard, normally aspirated engine V8 old school car.
Well, I think that's the whole thing about the umbrella that is Hypercar, with Le Mans Hypercar and with LMDH, the IMSA version, is that you can bring a front engine V8, you can bring a rear engine 4-cylinder turbo, you can have hybrid, you don't have to have hybrid, you can run petrol or diesel, you can have it road car based, not road car based, pure racer. You can bring almost literally anything with four wheels
As long as it reaches the criteria of
it can
a
produce
window of drag,
Yeah.
a window of weight, a window of power.
Yep.
And I've forgotten the fourth criteria right now.
That's
the downforce, drag, weight, and power.
Yeah.
As long as you meet those four criteria, and it's quite strict. I was speaking to the rule makers about this at the FIA. I was saying, so they did all their testing, and it's actually, like I said, right, where's the limit? Can you just turn up with a wheelbarrow and have the drag coefficient, the weight, the power, and I can go racing my wheelbarrow? He went, no. It's actually very hard to meet, to get into the window.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't be able to do it with anything.
It's got minima as well as maxima, and that's the thing. But
the tolerances are quite narrow.
But there's nothing on wheelbase or track or height or length, so you can build it to look like whatever. And here, you've got the Toyota, which was developed on a now moribund hypercar road car program to run in parallel. The race car arrived before the road car didn't. You've got the Glickenhaus, which originally was going to have 900 horsepower to take on the Valkyrie, and then when the Valkyrie didn't happen, the horsepower maximum was reduced to 671. I thought rather than 670, I thought that was a strange number. It's obviously different in PS, I don't know. So that then had to re-engine itself, but that's just a purebred racer that has a distinctive style of a sort of 60s-ish feel to it. The Peugeot, completely different again, lots of road car echoes in its face. The Ferrari looks like a more angry 488. I didn't think there was such a thing as a more angry 488, but that's what it looks like. The BMW's got the kidney grills at the front, but it's clearly a prototype. The Ferrari's clearly a prototype. The Peugeot's clearly a prototype, despite the fact it hasn't got a wing. You don't have to have a wing. You can create the drag and the lift whichever way you want. But it just has to fit in, as you say, a very narrow operating window.
And this is why it's attractive for manufacturers now.
Yeah.
It wasn't before, during LMP1, because they knew they were going to have to throw money at it to be successful. You needed to spend at least 200 million euros a year to have any hope in hell of competing.
Of hiring Van Davidson.
That was just for the driver salary.
But there was also the other problem is that the cars that were already in were just so good that you couldn't come in with a half-baked program. Look at you, Nissan. You had to be you had to be radical. That was their only option. They were not going to beat Audi and Porsche and Toyota at the level at which they'd achieved so rapidly. And by the way, that era of pretty unlimited development is exactly the message that motorsport across the world both is and should be peddling in this push towards renewable technologies, that there is no better laboratory to develop technology. That the progress in the time that you were with those LMP1 cars, and absolutely mind-bending.
It was like Formula One. Every time we went testing, there were upgrades, aero packages, improvements by at least a tenth or two every single time the car hit the track. And you knew if you sat still for any moment, the competition were going to draw ahead and away into the distance. So, it ebbed and flowed. There was a equivalency of technology, not a balance of performance, and that was quite a beautiful thing. Balance of performance is a different kettle of fish altogether, but it makes it cheaper and therefore makes it more attractive for more manufacturers to join, and better for the fans, it's better for us, and it gives us, in theory, closer racing.
And a broader church, lots of different looking cars from different manufacturers. And BOP has got a very bad name, but look at GT3. Look at the number of different cars
and
that are on any
any
GT3 grid, and that's what GT3 in World Endurance will bring. It will bring in manufacturers who just don't race here yet.
And that's the other point. GT3 is a very good example of it for two reasons. One is that breadth. That was a little bit wide, wasn't it?
It was.
That breadth of variety that you've got. The other thing is the stability of those grids, and indeed the growth of those grids. That's what has been so elusive for sports prototype racing in that ungoverned, well, it wasn't ungoverned, but almost unlimited development period. And at a time when the automotive industry in particular is under such political scrutiny, and under such technological scrutiny, that's why, frankly, everybody involved, from the FIA, the ACO, IMSA, all the manufacturers involved in the processes has led us to this convergence of regulations across the world, deserves, frankly, massive congratulations for getting to the point where we are and the point that we're going to.
But I mean, Martin touched on it earlier on. When you see that Peugeot on screen, you know, even if you took the badges off of it, all the colour scheme off it, you know, that blurry shot proves, you know it's a Peugeot. Just its face looks like a Peugeot. Their current cars look the same. Those diagonal LED lights, the claws as they call them, that's directly from their road car. There's that synergy between the two of them. And you know, marketing is important. We need, when we're watching it, they want the fans watching this to know it's a Peugeot. When Porsche come in to this category next year, they want the fans to know that that is a Porsche they're looking at on screen, without even looking at the badge, because there's that direct relationship between road car and racing car. They've never been able to have that before, apart from in the GTE, of course, which was the GTs are always quite popular with the manufacturers. Why? Because they look like their road-going versions, whereas the prototypes never did.
When I introduced sports car racing to, there's a bit of porpoising there from the 9X8.
Is that porpoise or is that bounce on the bumps?
No, it's porpoising when the front and the rear move independently.
To introduce and to explain these classes, what I've often said is, right, okay, imagine for a moment you won the lottery and the cars that you would aspire to, the Ferraris, the Aston Martins, the Porsches, we've got racing versions of those, and they're the slowest cars we've got. What you're then going to, and what moving into is quite right, is that visual identity that the manufacturers crave when bringing these cars to it. We now see more or less the entire crop for 23, and they're an impressive breed. We've seen the BMW that we'll be seeing in America next year, but in the WEC the year after. And again, with an evolution of their, it has to be said, somewhat divisive styling choice. But they've made a success of the styling on that car. I think it's actually one of the most attractive of the new breed is the BMW.
Well, I think the good news is the BMW isn't tall enough to get that truly horrendous current kidney grill in.
They've gone wide, not tall.
Well, it's M8 GTE front, isn't it? It's wide rather than deep.
They've gone the current post-COVID Goodwin styling rather than the Haven styling. It's width, not vertical.
But there'll be people looking at the Toyota, for example, say, well, that doesn't look like a road car, but it should have done.
Yes.
The road car should have looked like that,
They were building a hypercar. Maybe they still are. I don't know. It's all gone a bit quiet, but that's why this car looks like it does. And I know the paint scheme is pretty much identical to the old LMP1 car. And the aerodynamics that they learnt through the LMP1 program have filtered through to the road car.
Gentlemen, T3 and others are getting a nightmare, okay? Please ask your drivers to respect track limits, otherwise drive-thrus will start on the race on the first 8 laps. Either we get our act together or the race is going to be decided by the amount of pit stops done due to stop and goes.
Spot on. There you go. There's a race director making clear what he means.
He came into Formula One as well, Eduardo Freitas, and said the white line is the edge of the track. None of this, but I didn't make up time there, so therefore we turn a blind eye to that one. Okay, all right, we believe you. Here's the data to back it up. No, it's the white line. That's the edge of the racetrack, and it's the same for WEC as it is in Formula One now. And he's called it correctly there. Look, you keep playing around. This is FP3. By now, you should be respecting the track limit. Know where you're going. You know, FP1. I always ignore FP1 because you do overstep the mark. You haven't been here for 2 years.
It's in the Gilles Villeneuve room.
Can I say, all right, 2 seasons.
And so it begins.
I like this.
Of course, season 8, we're now in season 10. Season 8 was super season that went on for 2 years. And Fuji was in the first part of that. Fuji was before the first Le Mans of that year.
So anyway, by the time it gets to FP3, you should be respecting track limits a bit more. I think that was a strong amount of frustration coming from Eduardo there. Turn 3, you will find lap time if you run out wide there.
Here's the other point as well, which is the rules of motorsport are fairly complex, but they're drilled into you from the very beginning. You can't get to the point where the more elite end of a sport, you just ignore those same rules. It's the same for everybody. They are, bluntly, it is the same whether or not you're coming in an F4 car or an F1 car.
But I tell you
or a
what,
hypercar.
in the view to qualifying coming up, in all seriousness, qualifying coming up after this session, we will definitely see lap times deleted.
Yes.
And cars out of position on the grid for tomorrow's race.
And cars will fail to set a time because all their laps get deleted because the driver just can't keep it in. Can't do
this is turn
can't do
3
what
coming up
road
here.
car drivers do, which is stay within the white lines.
So this is the corner
Yep.
that Eduardo was mentioning. And you can clearly see a high-speed corner. It is such an advantage to run out wide there and carry that momentum.
Now, what you can do is have 2 wheels outside the white line. What you can't do is have all 4 wheels outside the white line.
One of your tyres has to be touching the white line. See there, the Ferrari went off the track on the exit of turn 6. And you can argue, and I would agree with the driver, that it's no faster. It's actually a mistake to be out there, but you were still off the track.
But it's still a mistake.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if it's no faster, don't do it.
Yeah, and if it was gravel, it would have definitely slowed you down a lot more.
Yeah.
So
And if it is faster, also don't do it. So, in the words of the great Doc Holliday, keep it on the grey stuff, son. That's what it's there for.
Should I don't think we mentioned, by the way, it was I think it was a 5-minute stop and go for the 98 car in this session, crossing the white line at pit exit. That is a no-no. The white line, as Eduardo will tell you, is a brick wall.
Yeah.
And you need to keep completely to the right.
And for very good reason here, because as you exit the pit lane, cars coming up behind you are doing 170 miles an hour and accelerating still as they come over a brow. So if you cross the white line beyond the brow, they don't even see you're meandering slowly in the middle of the road. You might be doing 90, 100 miles an hour, but when they're doing 175 and accelerating, you're still meandering slowly.
Yeah.
It can't be completely binary, though, in saying all of that, because there are limits. At some point, you need a bit of flexibility from the race director. A few years ago in Austin, Alex Wirtz spun in turn 1 and went off the track and got a track limits warning.
I get that.
So, and then I jumped in the car, and it was accumulative for each driver, for the drivers in the car.
This is where we're getting to it, Martin. This is where we're getting to it.
So I jump in the car.
I got a penalty for Alex Wirtz.
My first lap, get in the car. We've already had 2, and it was 3 and you're out. And you had your 5-second stop and go, and this was FP1. So we're all relearning the track, finding the limits, going off wide. And I went wide in turn 12 and almost came to a standstill, knowing that our car was on the last warning. Almost came to a standstill on the exit and reported back to the team, look, I've just been off in turn 12. I'm literally stopped on the track. I definitely haven't gained anything from this. Of course, we got the 5-minute stop and go. I absolutely lost it. I was apoplectic. I got out the car. I was screaming at the officials. Ended up in the steward's room afterwards. But
Descent. Should have been a yellow card. Should have been stood down for the entire session.
One little detail I'd not noticed until just now, by the way. If you joined us at the top of the show, you'd have seen at the very end of the Circuit Safari session with the buses on track. And
is there still a bus out there?
No.
Oh, okay.
There's no, don't say that, Graham. That's insulting to some of the drivers. We did have problems to the 77 car. That car is out on track and has been for some little time. In fact, Chris Reed just putting in the fastest first sector for that car as he makes his way back up to speed. So repairs to the left rear suspension of that car have been completed.
However, it did lose 10 laps.
It did.
So this is it's completed 7, whereas a number of the other GTE Pro and AM cars have completed 17, 18. Corvette here for the first time, not quite on the pace of Ferrari and Porsche. Again, running out all 4 wheels out wide at turn 1. That will be a penalty.
And a long chat, by the way, with Tommy Milner yesterday after the first practice session. He was saying they were finding 10 kilometres an hour down on top speed to their competitors. So they spent the first pre-practice session dialing downforce out of the car. And what's going on there, Anne?
A bit of brake duct cooling or tuning. They're the brake duct inlets there at the front of the car. And car 28 hasn't had a completely trouble-free session, has it? But it's still up there in P5.
Yep. Their
sister car 38 heads the field at the moment in LMP2 yet again after yesterday's strong performance into the 31s, 31.8. for car 38 and 32.1 for Van der Zande in Vector Sport. Of course, yeah. Van der Zande here now.
Just noting, by the way, on the left-hand rear wing end plate, you'll notice there is not a red sticker, but a black band. And that is one of a number of tributes following the news from back at home in the UK for all three of us here, and I'm sure thousands out there. The death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, and lots of the British teams and drivers marking, I'm afraid, that very sad news, and that's Jota's tribute to her this weekend.
Right front tyre change on the Alpine. Not quite sure why. This is a
problem there.
A hold here for some reason. Are they? Is that a penalty hold? Is that a 1 minute stop and go? Didn't see any notification on the screen of a penalty.
Well, they only changed the front right, so I don't know if the driver was feeling something in that part of the car. Jota's still there, 28.
Did they check the tyre as it came off? Was that just why the hold was?
Well, no, they just left it sitting on the side. There was definitely no tyre engineer there having a look at it, nobody from the team having a look at it. Didn't look like it had delaminated or picked up or blistered in any way.
It looked fine. But the drivers, don't forget, car 36, although the team isn't leading the Constructors' Championship, they're 10 points ahead
of the Drivers'
Championship in their car 36. So, yeah, this is a very important weekend for the Alpine crew. That's what we're going to see here. Peugeot down in towards turn 10, car 93.
Big lock-up. It went that way.
Oh, yeah, and then when you go wide there, you have to navigate your way through these bollards.
Did he make it? Yes, he did.
Well, they need to, because the tour buses managed to get through there. Down at Alpine is the fourth member of our on-air crew, Louise Beckett. Good morning, Louise.
Good morning. Yeah, I just spoke to Andre Negrão and I said, oh, why just change that one tyre? And he said just to test. So then he didn't seem bothered or that there was any issues there.
No, they definitely didn't pay much attention to it. They just threw a new one at it. Thank you very much indeed. What's the weather like, by the way? Is it still quite as humid as it was?
Yes, it is.
Excellent. No need for the wellies, hopefully. All right, so yeah, it's been very warm and humid. I mean, the forecast was earlier in the week for about 30 degrees on race day, which
it's been steamy all week here. I was going to ask, which is the loaded tyre here?
Well, it's a clockwise circuit, and with turn 5 being so fast, I'd have to say it's the front left tyre, but the rears take a lot of brunt in the final sector with a lot of overheating. Not so much wear on the rear, but a lot of overheating. But interesting that they've done that down at Alpine. The front right, they might have gone for a different compound. You can mix them up in this category rating. It's not like Formula 1.
Or
you
as
can
you said,
chop and change your
might
tyres.
just have felt something on it.
Yep.
Yeah, it might have been just, you know, felt the tyre going away, but I would say that's suggests to me that's
trying a harder
compound, or maybe a softer compound on the front right, because that's usually the unloaded tyre.
So the benefit to that would be that you then only need to change 3 tyres at certain stops, which makes it just that fraction quicker, and they need everything they can get in the pits.
Yeah, it's either strategy in terms of you know, one less wheel in the pit stops,
and maybe working on left sides only, or that sort of thing. Let's hear from the team, see what they've got to tell us.
Clean, hold tight. 2 laps.
Oh.
It's not super clean, the tire, huh? It's not super clean. So when we put on.
Not so bumpy?
I didn't quite get that either. A bit of a broken up radio message, but yeah, they're clearly testing something down there at Alpine in terms of the balance, and you do need to give it more than 1 or 2 laps for them all to rebalance. I was never a fan of chopping and changing different compounds from side to side or front to rear. I always like to have the same set on all 4.
Yeah.
And especially when you start to chop and change them through a session, it gives you a very different feel as one tyre is getting up to temperature and the rest are already there.
And you would think, okay, why are they only doing 2 laps on it? Is that a quali sim? Well, no, because there's no point having 1 fresh tyre and 3 old ones if you're thinking of doing a quali sim. So you would change all 4 tyres and we wouldn't know that one was different.
And also, you just rush for time.
Yeah.
You wouldn't believe it. If you're down in the garage and you've got 3 drivers there that need to get their time behind the wheel, how quickly that 1 hour session goes. Even a 1.5 hour session goes incredibly fast.
Well, especially
you're always fighting time.
Especially when drivers are earning themselves 5-minute stop and holds.
Yeah. 7 Toyota on pit lane. Just to update about where the times are in the other classes. Here's the 38 Jota car, top of LMP2. In GTE Pro, for the first time this weekend, it's a Porsche at the top. It's the number 91 car that leads GTE Pro, ahead of the AF Corse Ferraris, which have topped both of the sessions so far. It's the 51 car that's topped FP1 and FP2. It's then a Team Project 1 1-2 in GTE AM. It's been the 46 car, as usually, in the hands of Matteo Caroli, that's been the form car there, but it's the 56 that I'm sure will be a time from Ben Barnicoat in that car. No Brendan Arieb this weekend. Takeshi Kimura, usually with Car Guy, a very locally based team, is filling in and doing a significantly better than adequate job at the moment, and that 56 car tops the 46 1-2 for Team Project 1 before the Spirit of Race 71 Ferrari, currently in the hands of Gabby Obery, third quickest.
Yeah, I was going to say a driver change there. You beat me to it there, Graham, with the local
Kimura-san. Yep.
Local driver behind the wheel, knows his way around the circuit very well indeed. So yeah, if you're going to replace your driver for a Japanese driver at any stage, why not do it at Fuji? But it was a COVID-related issue, so it was force majeure, so the team don't take any penalty because of the driver change.
But it's Brendan, I gather, with a close contact with a relative who has proved to be positive. That's 34 car taking a big leap over the curbs there. Who's aboard the 34?
That was Brundle. Yeah, so he's had a spin in the final corner early on in the session, and that was a big hit going over the curb.
And that was on an in-lap, because he's now in the pit lane. So there he is.
Yeah, that would have that takes the wind out of you.
Now then,
sausage curve like that.
Let's talk a little. We'll talk about Kaz Nakajima a little while, because you had a chat with him yesterday.
Vice chairman of Toyota Gazoo Europe doesn't want to be on camera.
No publicity, no publicity.
Well, hang on, that's even more his job now than it was as a driver. But you were saying he's got full team manager head on now.
Yeah, I was surprised. Yeah, you'll hear the interview on Sunday. But
especially considering you were a teammate.
I know.
You're mates. You've been out for dinner and all the usual pranks and joshing and all that. You've got that personal relationship. So it's not just a journalist sitting down with a camera. That's quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, he's still incredibly friendly. We'll always be mates, but you can definitely tell he's taken that role very seriously, and. Yeah, he's a very intelligent person. He was an intelligent racer as well. Still can't quite believe he's stepped away from driving. He says he doesn't miss it. He's younger than me. I think he's still in his mid-30s. So, yeah, it's an impressive age to turn to management. But I think he's going to do it. He's doing a very good job. Let's hear from Lopez, one of his drivers.
Copy Alpha 53.
Copy Alpha 12-1. Is the engine brake in sector 3? We remove it, we go normal, and we test it later. Alpha 12-1.
Alpha 12-1, copy.
Okay, and Alpha 3-6, we have low recovery in sector 3, so it was a bit better, so we test again Alpha 3-6.
Alpha 3-6.
Okay, we are good to go.
Yeah, interesting. They're playing around with the regen in the final sector there, and he had the message that Kamui was gaining a bit more through the electronic system under braking in the final sector. So work on that, and also if you can't, try a different mode, which will do a bit more regen for you. So yeah, Jose Maria Lopez just calmly going about his work and making those changes from behind the wheel, and he's in that sector 3 now.
And that then. They haven't instructed him to do that right from the start. They've let him get a feel for the car, and then looking at where he's maybe losing a bit of time or he's getting too much wheel slip, and then saying, okay, try adjusting this, try adjusting that. There was a little message up on screen, which has now just disappeared from race control. I don't remember who the driver was. Somebody was, Jan Halen in the 88 Dempsey Proton car. He's now just come into the pits, but warned for track limits at turn 3.
I saw
turn
that, yeah.
7. Turn 9,
was
turn
it multiple?
13,
Oh,
turn
dear.
15. Yeah, I mean, it was. I think he was good in turn 1, but basically everywhere
That's
they were
'cause there's grass on the exit of turn 1.
But that was. It didn't say multiple infringements. It just listed it. That was really, guys, would you just get a grip of yourselves?
I'm just going to ask Ant, and we listened to Jose Maria Lopez and that feedback, the interaction with the engineer. I can recall early days of LMP1 Hybrid, you doing an interview. I think it was either with WCTV, it might have been with John Hindhaugh for Radio Le Mans, about the level of acuity that was required to manage the systems in those early days of LMP1 Hybrid. We know that a lot of that was sort of dialed out in the cars I think I remember interviewing Alex Wirtz later on in the life of LMP1 Hybrid, where things that some of the automatic kind of side of things had kind of come in. It does sort of feel as if it's been reset again. There's a little more that's involved from the driver's point of view now. Is that right?
It's funny, that interview, what Toyota were doing back then was, it was in a grey area of the regulations. And I think the rule makers realised it was becoming a little bit too automated. And they made changes to the regulations after that, which meant that you couldn't, the car, it knows where it is on the track, and therefore it would make adjustments in the braking. As you were holding your foot on the brake, it would make adjustments from front to rear on the bias, or vice versa. So it would actually help your stability quite a lot. And they realised that's actually it's a bit too much of a driver aid, and they went against that in the future for the rule. They tightened that ruling up. So yeah, you're right. It has brought it back a bit more into the driver's hands. It was a very clever system, and it still is a very clever system. What it's turned into now is that what you could hear there, although I was saying before how the Alpine versus the Toyota one's got the hybrid, one hasn't, and you'd expect the hybrid to be using less fuel. Well, relative to their car, they can still use more or less fuel. So if you're using more electronics, so more battery boost, instead of the internal combustion engine power, you're using less fuel. So that's what in the olden days, it used to give you that extra boost on top. So it was a big incentive to gain as much energy back under braking and all of those systems as possible. Whereas today it's more about fuel saving within your car. So you do the fuel and save the lift and coast at the end of the straight. It's another way to fuel save. If you've got more battery delivery than ICE delivery, you still will use less fuel. So it's an incentive there for all the drivers and the team to work as hard as they can without losing lap time performance, to run as much of that lap on the battery instead of the ICE. It means that you can use less fuel. That's what they're talking. That's what it was all about, basically. It's not just a stability thing they're talking about. It's more fuel usage.
What you want is zero state of charge as you come across the finish line, so that you've used as much of the potential.
Well, how it works
hybrid as possible.
The battery. One thing that they've learnt through racing compared to the road car industry is that they've learned that to keep a battery healthy, you have to keep it in its happy equilibrium of mid state of charge. Let's hear from Alex Brundle, who's had a bit of a tough session so far.
Alex, of course, these sessions are about getting the car fit and feeling how you want it to. You've had a couple of moments this session. What's going on?
Yeah, we got a really tough balance in the car at the moment. So we've been running very long on older tyres just to see how that works out. Turns out it doesn't. But yeah, no issues, but we got some things to fix before qualifying, that's for sure.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, Alex coming back to his contemporary racing scene from some historic racing, the Silverstone Classic with what they call it, the Brustang.
The Brustang,
yes.
That was that moment, wasn't it? Turn 12 exit.
And currently going through, by the way, a online build program with a Ford GT40.
Yes, which he says is an awful lot more straightforward than building the Mustang, because with the Mustang, the historic regs are relatively wishy-washy, and you can basically, this is probably not quite exactly the phrase, and he'll give me a real kicking for it later, but decide what you like. Whereas the GT40 actually has historically accurate-ish suspension. So, yeah, no, he was instrumental in the Mustang was his project, and he was instrumental in doing quite a lot of the build himself. because he just wanted to learn how it worked and you know, have that film process. And yeah, now moving on to a GT40. Obviously, next thing will be a Ford GT and then a Moonlander. I mean, I don't know where you go from there, you know. And my random tinkering with an old Morris Minor, very much on the back burner. Let's talk a little bit about porpoising, Ant, which is obviously the phrase that pays in Formula One this season. For years, decades, we haven't seen any porpoising in Formula One, or indeed in prototype racing, but it is here with the Peugeot, and that is because the Peugeot that doesn't have a rear wing generates its downforce from...
Well, now they're getting more of their grip through the ground effects, the floor of the car, rather than relying so much on the wings.
So Peugeot have put themselves in the same position that all the Formula One teams have had to, is that the predominantly the aerodynamic downforce is coming from the underfloor, and you know the teams that
I did wonder that
worked
when I saw
around
it,
in the 80s, because I watched the Toyota later, and there's no sign at all of it bouncing on bumping. So that is a proper ground effect braking porpoise.
I mean, still, this car we were just riding on board with, the Toyota still makes most of its downforce through the floor. It's such a powerful area of the car, because it's such a wide car. Such a big floor surface, so you utilize that to gain your downforce through the floor. So, and it's the most efficient. It's the most efficient way to get downforce. There's less drag doing it that way than doing it through big, gigantic wings sticking out at all kinds of weird angles, creating that drag there. So, you see how on the rear wing, it's in a fixed position on that Toyota. So it's. Actually, no, they can adjust that rear wing, can't they? Yes, it's something you get in Hypercar, one area that you can adjust. The Glickenhaus was the front that they could adjust with a fixed rear wing. The Toyota has an adjustable rear wing, but very minimal movement, and you can see how low down it is compared to the likes of a Formula One car, for example. So it's low drag. It's a low drag setup, and you gain most of your downforce through the floor. But the Peugeot has no rear wing, so you'd have to assume it's gaining more of its downforce through the floor than the Toyota. Does that cause more porpoising, or is it a suspension design or whatever that's that, you know, if you run any car too low, it will start to porpoise?
And the adjustable aerodynamic element in the Peugeot is in the nose. It's in the opening at the front. Yeah, exactly. So yes, and actually there was a great shot there of going around to the top of the wheel arch, which in the Toyota, as we've seen for a long time in LMP1, is open to blow off air if the car gets sideways, so the car doesn't lift and fly around like a leaf in a storm. That's no longer mandatory. You don't have to have that. What you have to do is prove with CFD, and the FIA have to be able to repeat it, that if the car gets sideways, it will not take off. It will dissipate air in some other way. So if you can figure out a clever way of doing that, you don't have to have the vents in the top, over the rear wheel, over the front wheel either, and you can duct the air the way you want. And there's all sorts of elements that were previously mandatory that are still mandatory, but the solution to them is not nominated. And that's the lift drag thing. For instance, in the LMDH, they have a lift drag coefficient of 4:1. I don't care how you do it, but that's what it is. It has to be 4:1. 3.9, 4.1 doesn't cut it. It has to be 4:1. So there's all sorts of different elements there, and it's sort of almost going back to Cosworth era Formula One. You've got a Cosworth engine, you've got a Hewland gearbox, you've got Goodyear tyres. Go away and do the rest yourself. You know, certain elements, I mean, it's not the mechanical bits here that are specified in any way, shape or form, but certain elements that are, as you said, that dictate performance are very tightly specified, and you must hit those numbers.
The other aspect of this, we had a long chat with the guys behind this rule sets a couple of races ago, that it's always interesting to hear other people's way of expressing an issue or a problem. And it was that conversation we had with the FIA guys, with the ACO technical team about balanced performance. And to hear them express it as effectively what we're defining is the maximum possible performance. How close you get to that maximum is the job of the team and the drivers. And I like that. I think that's a lot clearer than the kind of nonsense you see, hear and read that talks about teams being nerfed with 10 kilos. It's pointless. It's a pointless kind of, you know, what is it going to cost them? It's potentially going to cost them this amount of time in an absolutely ideal world without doing anything else to the car to mitigate where that weight is going to be.
Yeah.
It's never that simple.
And I think BOP got a bad name through the GTE racing.
Yep.
Because it's a different system that they were using to analyse the car's performance compared to how they're doing it now. Yeah. So I think that going forward, GT3 is going to be the same as how they monitor it in Hypercar. So in theory, the Hypercar category should be a more elegant solution to BOP than the GTE. For me, the jury's still out. But
yeah, absolutely.
Well, and
work.
the other factor is that they are determining what the maximum performance of the car in theory is. Now, whether the teams and drivers ever get that out of it or not remains to be seen. Let's say, for instance, you want to run a GT3 Porsche and I want to run a GT3 Porsche, and you've got a good team and I've got an okay team, and you're driving it and I'm driving it. It's the same car. Potentially it can go just as fast. It's not going to go as fast for me as it is for you. And that's where everybody goes, well, it doesn't work, because you look at it, it does work. It does work. It's not about how fast you actually go, it's how fast the car could go if you did it properly.
Well,
without insulting anybody, that, you know, and you go to the Spa 24 Hours, everybody goes, oh, BOP this, BOP that. You've got 26 cars on the grid covered by less than a second. I'm sorry, and they're not all 26 identical cars. I'm sorry, BOP works.
Sorry to talk Formula One for a second, but you know, everyone would have seen how strong Max Verstappen was at his home circuit last race out, but Sergio Perez wasn't there, and people would say, "Oh, the Red Bull is so dominant. What a dominant car!" Well, it wasn't the car necessarily, because Sergio Perez wasn't up there with him.
Well, and
if we were talking BOP, what do you do now? Do you start giving Red Bull more weight in their car and less power
because of the slower guy?
Yeah, I mean, no. You look to the front always, and then you have to ask the question: well, was it the car or is it the driver? Is that driver getting more out of the car than it?
Mansell and Patrese in the active Williams. Patrese was nowhere near Nige because he couldn't overcome his whole career of training that the car was going to crash. He had reached the limit, and that was as quick as the car would go. Nige believed the engineers and just pushed further.
We don't often talk about times in a free practice session, but there is one significant thing on that timing screen, which is
2 minutes 30 left.
2 minutes 30 left, but the Toyotas at the moment bookend the Hypercar field with 1.6 seconds between them. It is Toyota number 7 leading the way, number 8 leading the way, with then the 2 Peugeots, then the Alpine, and then the number 7 Toyota. And that's not something we've been used to be seeing this weekend so far. We did hear that interaction between Jose Maria Lopez and engineer, but any idea what might be going on there? Well, that's a big gap.
It is a big gap. I mean, the only thing I can assume is that one has had a clear lap when they've done their qualifying simulation run, and the other one didn't. Don't forget the traffic, and you need that lucky one lap where you have no cars in front of you and no cars to navigate your way through to get the best out of it. And that's one element of sports car racing, which actually I really like, because it's not just about the pure lap time, the fastest time anyone could do. There's a lot more to it than that. It's about how efficient you are at working your way through the traffic in the racing sense, and that ultimate lap time, people don't get as hung up on it as they do in other series around the world.
And you see exactly the same here in GTE Pro. Is the Porsche the fastest car or the slowest car? Yes, it is.
But here's your thing.
It is both.
FP2, we had, let me get this right, was it 3 or 4 of the classes that had 1-2 from an individual team. In this session, as we've got now Brendan Hartley and Jose Maria Lopez pretty quick on these laps right now, it's actually bookending you're quite right, in Hypercar, and as well as that in GTE Pro. It is a 1-2 still in GTM for Team Project 1.
Wow.
Jota, Vector Sport having a cracking run here in this session. They were on the podium, were they not, at Monza? Am I remembering that correctly? They had a very strong run, but Vector Sport's second quickest, Ryan Cullen currently at the wheel. Renger van der Zande here with Sebastian Bourdais, those two teammates in IMSA Racing. And that's one of a number of changes to the entry in terms of drivers this weekend. A couple of fresh faces for us, or returning faces in some instances. Nico Müller elsewhere this weekend.
And Chatin as well in the number 1 Richemille car.
Completes the season now, won't he, with Seb Ogier stepping back from his programme. There's a checkered flag for the end of this session. Well, that was 60 minutes that seemed to pretty much fly by.
You'd have to say that it looks like Toyota have the edge. They were fast.
Yes.
They've been fastest in every session so far. I would be surprised in qualifying to see a Peugeot out-qualify them, but you never know.
That was Michael Christensen collecting the bollard. And gets a warning flag, Michael.
But, seeing this car on screen, the 9X8, it's had a much better run throughout this weekend so far compared to Monza. It seems like a more robust car, more reliable. I've probably cursed it now. But the drivers seem happier in it. They're closer to Toyota's lap times.
Yeah.
It's a shame that Glickenhaus aren't here. I do miss them. I do miss them.
Well, let's hope we're going to see them back at Bahrain. We know, by the way, now that Porsche have confirmed that we will not see the 963 there. They're going to be continuing their test program for that car ahead of its real debut in the 2023 season. There's all sorts of developmental push now with the LMDH rules cars, which we won't see before next season.
There's the Peugeot in front of car 8. Car 8 just seems like he's backing out of it.
Yeah, checkered flag's out, so he's passed the checkered flag.
Or maybe he's just lifting coasting.
Almost everybody, actually.
It's rated 46, and that will be the final car to complete a flying lap here. And that car rolls down pit lane. That is end of session.
Now, the other thing, even on an in-lap, and when you're following the Peugeot and you're driving the Toyota, you are learning things about the Peugeot. All right, you're not absolutely on it, but you will feel from what you're doing.
Watching it now, I misinterpreted that. I thought he was backing out of it, but he was just doing a lift and coast, and the Peugeot actually lets him by. Probably because of that reason. I want to see where your car's stronger.
Yeah,
and it is definitely part of your debrief, a big part of your debrief. When you go back into that office or truck, if it's a European race, a huge part is level of competition. It's even on your driver debrief sheet as well, where other cars seemed better or worse in the race or testing. Whenever you met them on track, areas of weakness in your car where you can improve as a team in the hunt for development. And so you are constantly analysing, on that exit of that last corner there, did the car in front just look like he had slightly better traction? That will go down in your notes. Straight line speed, I was definitely had an advantage there. I know I was in the slipstream, but I was comfortably catching. That will go down in the notes. And it's all taken on board from the team.
Because in free practice and in qualifying, what you don't discover is how and where you're going to be able to overtake, and so all of those little elements start perhaps to point to where, as you see, where the weakness, of a rival car might be, or where your strength might be.
I can tell you now, for years at Toyota, we always used to write down in our debrief, we're stronger under the brakes in our competition. That we had the braking element, it was kinetic only, the recovery. We didn't have a heat recovery system from the turbo, and the car was brilliant under the braking, and that would always go down in the notes.
So FP3 has been completed. You can see Louise Beckett down there at Toyota Gazoo Racing with Rob Loipen rather, and lots of fans in here. Really nice again. It's been so good all year long to have fans at circuits, and this is such a popular track among the Japanese fans. And a chance to come here. And, it is Toyota's home circuit. Literally, it's not just because it's in Japan. They actually own the track and the whole facility. But the fan loyalty at any international race at the Japanese circuit, you've only got to look at, Suzuka 8-hour motorcycle race or Formula One Grand Prix or even, World Endurance, World Touring Cars, anything. The fans come out in droves. And it's just so nice to see all the enthusiasm and all the colour in the grandstands. And even some old and slightly tattered Ant Davidson banners in the grandstand.
matching the man himself.
Indeed. So let's see how they finish. Toyota Gazoo Racing bookending our hypercar class with Peugeot second and third, ahead of Alpine. The drivers in that 36 Alpine leading the hypercar point standings. Jota ahead of Vector Sport, who did finish third in Monza, and WRT in third. Richard Mille, Jota and Prema, the top 6 in LMP2. GT Pro, Porsche are either the fastest car or the slowest car, with AF Corsas, Ferraris and the Corvette between them, and the screen's just gone blank, so I'll look at the other one. In GTM, Team Project 1 Porsches first and second, ahead of the 71 Spirit Race Ferrari, and the 2 AF Corsa cars behind that. So top Aston is the TF Sport car, ahead of the sister D-Station car and the AMR Run Northwest car. But Dempsey Proton, well, they didn't have the greatest time, and the Iron Lynx car at the tail of the field. Well, what that relates to in qualifying terms remains to be seen. It did look, when Harry Tintle came in, as though basically I would have said a bolt had come off from the top mount of the damper, and the whole wishbone and hub was just moving up and down freely. So that was, it actually took 10 laps to fix. So it may be more than just a missing bolt. Graham's
struggle for the red button. Only noticed right at the very end there, and I'll confirm this post-session, massively close gaps in GTM. Next to nobody over a tenth.
So free practice 3 is over. Our next track session will be qualifying, and that comes up at 2:40 local time here in Fuji.